Welcome to Restoring Education in America with Priscilla Rahn. She's a master educator and author, leading the conversation to restore the American mind through wisdom, virtue, and truth.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Restoring Education in America. I'm your host, Priscilla Rahn, and I am so thrilled that you've decided to join the conversation today. We are right in the middle of school choice time. Parents are looking for great options for their children, and one of those great options is Excalibur Classical Academy. They're a new private school that's opening in the Centennial area this fall, K through third grade. And their mission and vision is restoring America's heritage by developing servant leaders who are keepers and defenders of the principles of freedom, for which our founding fathers pledged their lives, fortunes, and sacred honor. So I would encourage you to take a look at Excalibur. Their website is up. There's a lot of information on curriculum. Go to excaliburclassicalacademy.org and reach out for a tour and for an open house session. And also, if you're a teacher looking for a great place to teach, please send your resume to Excalibur Classical Academy. Well, I am really excited to bring my next guest to the stage because she is a fighter and a warrior in the education space and in all things Colorado politics. I'm going to bring her to the stage right now. Welcome, Representative Dusty Johnson. Hi, how are you, Dusty?
I'm good. It's good to see you.
Well, before we get into the conversation, I can see right now that you are at the state capitol, so I'm not going to delay, but let me share a little bit of your bio with our listeners. Representative Dusty Johnson grew up in Fort Morgan, Colorado, where she raised goats and played soccer. She earned a Bachelor of Arts in Politics with a focus on agriculture and water from Regis University, and completed a healthcare certificate in emergency management systems from Morgan Community College. Her passion for agriculture and rural communities was shaped through her involvement in 4-H and FFA and continues to guide her work today. With over a decade of experience in politics, Dusty has served as a legislative aide to a U.S. congressman and 3 state senators, and previously held leadership roles within the Republican Party. She now represents House District 63 in Northeast Colorado, where she focuses on supporting rural communities, strengthening agriculture, and bridging the rural-urban divide. She serves on multiple committees, including agriculture, education, and health and human services, in addition to the joint year-round audit committee. And she is a fellow 2024 LPR best class ever, right? Is yours the best class ever?
Definitely 24.
Well, when I have guests on, I always try to find something that we have in common. And the only thing I can say is that I am a member of the Farm Bureau in Douglas County. That's about as close as I don't raise goats. I don't raise animals, but I do use goat's milk in my soap. I hand make soap. So that's
counts. Well, and you understand agriculture, so that's the huge, bridging right there.
Well, and also I am growing a lavender farm in my backyard in Highlands Ranch. So that's about as much as we can do here in the urban area of Douglas County, I guess you could say. But I'm really excited to have this conversation with you around all of the wonderful things that you're doing down at the Capitol. First, I want to thank you for stepping up and being a leader. And every time I see you down at the Capitol, you have a smile on your face and you're so joyful, but I know it's a lot of hours. So thank you so much for caring about our state to try to push some really great bills. One of the bills that you have introduced is House Bill 26-1191, examination of school district records, and it's in final act. Congratulations. Why don't you tell our listeners what this is about and how you think this is going to benefit Coloradans?
So it's an audit bill. It's really taking off a lot of the burdens, especially for our school districts, our teachers, our staff who are doing phenomenal jobs. This applies to school districts who have charters and they receive any capital development funds. Prior to this bill introduction, I guess still technically law, is they have to get audited every year. And that's timely, that's expensive. It's a lot of extra paperwork for schools that are doing top-notch stuff. This bill moves it where the state auditor doesn't have to audit every year. They can audit based on discretion or concerns. So if there are issues, there is that auditability skill. But if, many of our schools doing phenomenal work, why would we add extra, bureaucracy, extra red tape? It takes resources to do these audits when those capital development dollars really should go back to, the students first, the staff supporting the teachers. So this is just one way to help roll back government overreach. The audit process is still there for when it's needed, but it really is a way just to not have to duplicate processes.
Well, that just answers any of my concerns about the fact that maybe somebody might say, hey, well, we want to make sure the government has oversight over everything. But what you're saying is this bill still does that if there are concerns, either the school district or I'm assuming even someone in the community, a parent could say, hey, can we look into where these dollars are spent? So there are some guardrails in place, but that makes total sense. Reducing the size of government, good for you. There should be, more of that happening down at the Capitol. As a resident of Colorado, I don't necessarily feel like we need 500 to 700 new bills every year that are more laws. Like repeal some of this stuff. That makes total sense. Good job. So that's going to the governor's
and desk. You hit it on the nail. It is. Yeah. And you hit it on the nail. I mean, sometimes we need laws to repeal laws, which kind of basically it's a 1-for-1 a strike, which is good. So, a couple of those 700 some bills are really trying to get rid of things. And the one thing I'll add, because you mentioned school choice, what we were seeing a lot for these school districts with charters receiving these funds, it would be out of district folks that just don't like charters. And so they'd be adding all this other stuff saying, we want to, pile on the work. We want to do extra oversight. And they're not even in the area. They're just anti-charter. So they're going to do everything they can to be a hindrance.
When I was in the teachers union, and a lot of people know my story. I was in the teachers union for over 2 decades. And I was indoctrinated as a teacher to be anti-charter, and they kept saying, they're going to profit and there's all of these bad things about charters, but I was never really told the truth that charters are public schools. They still have to follow the same laws that other, regular public schools have to follow. And so having oversight and having common sense laws are really what we need. And to any educator who's watching this encore or listening to this on the radio, school choice is part of the foundation of our government. And you and I have learned this as LPR graduates, what the proper role of government is. And it brings me a lot of comfort knowing you're there and you understand this, because a lot of our friends down at the Capitol don't understand what the proper role of government is. Talk to me about how you approach your decisions when you're either presenting a bill or having to vote on a bill.
Yeah, I do. I have a lot of database contacts or pocket friends where I have 7 counties. That means 34 school districts. When approached on bills, I go back to the people it affects. So I reach out to the teachers, the supervisors, the parents on education bills. If it's healthcare, I reach out to the hospitals, the patients, the clinics. If it's agriculture, I go to my farmers, ranchers, the ag organizations, and really try to do a polling as much as I can. And with the 2nd largest House district for land mass and the 5th largest on all of the districts, it means I have a great way to, look at the different scapes. I can ask, Weld and then Yuma and then Phillips, and try to get it as holistic for my district on whether I, support a bill, if I get on a bill, or if I oppose it, or I try to do amendments.
That's really critical. What you said is you listen to your constituents in your district. And I think that's a sign of a great representative, because I've seen sometimes people get excited about this title of, being an honorable whatever. And then they go down to the Capitol and they forget that they're a public servant and that they are supposed to be serving and representing the people of their community. So good job on remembering the people. And teachers, it's really critical to hear from us as educators because we're in the classroom every day. So there is a new one, Dusty, that is still being edited and amended, I should say, House Bill 26-1292. But I believe this is going to be eventually coming to the Education Committee. And it has to do with President Trump's education tax credit. So we know Governor Polis is the first and only Democrat governor in the United States to opt into the tax credit. And for our listeners who may not know what it is, it's if you donate $1,700 to an SGO, which is a scholarship granting organization like ACE Scholarships, then you can get a $1,700 federal tax credit. And that money can be used for parents and private schools, charter schools, any kind of education auxiliary type of opportunity for students to apply towards more education. House sponsor Goldstein and Senate sponsors Kipp and Marchman have this bill concerning requirements related to a federal tax program involving scholarship granting organizations and in connection therewith establishing requirements for a school that receives funds from a scholarship granting organization. And really quickly, the bill summary says if the state voluntarily elects to participate in a federal program that provides a tax credit for a qualified contribution to a scholarship granting organization, the bill requires the state to include all eligible scholarship granting organizations on its list identifying scholarship granting organizations to the federal government. If a school enrolls a student whose education-related expenses are paid in whole or in part by a scholarship granting organization, the bill requires the school to comply with non-discrimination requirements and laws concerning students with disabilities. If the school that is a subject to these requirements violates a requirement, the school is subject to an injunction and may have its eligibility to receive money for a student whose education-related expenses are paid by a scholarship granting organization suspended. That's a lot of words. You're used to that. It's a mouthful. But basically what it's saying is you cannot be a school that doesn't follow all of the state's non-discrimination laws. And it's not just about students with disabilities and IEPs. It's about the big elephant in the room, which is the transgender issue, boys and girls sports, transgender bathrooms, and that type of stuff. So you haven't seen this yet. I know it's coming to you on the education committee. Have you had a chance to dig into this at all yet?
I've done a quick dig in, so I have a ton more to learn on it. Usually things I look at when I look at a bill in a quick glance, and I always fully read and fully research before I vote. But it hasn't been scheduled yet in committee. But at a quick glance, I looked, it has a fiscal note. Why are we taking, donated dollars and then putting it to administration? It seems like, one, where's the money going? If it's going to more government as opposed to students and education is an issue. With a whole new FTE that they're asking for, trying to figure out, that process. You're right when it's, you can't discriminate, but then it's discriminating saying, you can only go to public, but why can't you go to charter? Why can't it go to homeschool? Why can't we broaden it to, if you're a donor, you should be able to kind of, I wouldn't be earmarking, but if I want to donate, and obviously I could not use the government to do it, but I want to get the tax credits, I could go donate to a homeschool organization. I can go donate to a private school. If I want to go and give new uniforms to a charter or my alumni, high school, I could do that. But adding those caveats, it's already a done deal, but in theory, it could have said we couldn't go to, schools that had Native American names. We went through that with the mascots in Yuma County. And it was the natives that were local that wanted that recognition. It was an honor form, and the state said no. So now you're opening it, to sports. Does that mean you have two boys playing on the volleyball team or things like that? And or softball instead of going to baseball. And does that mean if you don't have enough qualified bathrooms, you don't get these grants? Or the way it's going in the state with some bills we've seen, if you don't have changing rooms in the bathrooms for high school and middle school, because that's a raising issue we've seen with students. And they're focusing on business this year, but I can see them going through schools and saying now they need changing rooms because we need accessibility that way. And it's just, where does this end and where does it go? I'm sure there's some positives in it. I always see the red flags first, kind of like what you alluded to. And
yeah, but I'm also questioning if this is a federal program, why is the state trying to intervene and create more rules, because my understanding from my interview with Governor Polis was that the state is actually waiting for the rules from the federal government. And now we have Democrat legislators who want to impose additional rules outside of what the federal government does. And so it's adding, in my opinion, adding another layer of bureaucracy. But also, to your point, we're about freedom. If a donor wants to donate money to a scholarship fund that already supports private schools, like a scholarship, they give money to applicants directly, then it should be the right of an individual to donate that money to whatever institution or student that they want to. And so I will probably come and testify in education committee on this bill, because I do not see it the proper role of the state of Colorado to tell donors where they can and cannot. And that's the whole point of private education, is to be able to practice freedom of religion, practice their right for education choice and that type of thing. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up because I know a lot of people don't know about this bill, and it's going to be coming up at some point. So we'll be watching to see when it comes to committee.
I was going to say, to your point too, I mean, it's in rulemaking that our departments can follow federal directive for funds. If they wanted a feel-good bill, they could just say, we direct to rulemaking that you don't have to come back to ask, that we can follow whatever the federal says. It would be a no-brain bill. It wouldn't do anything because they have that in rules already. But if the sponsors wanted recognition for doing something for education, they could just say, we direct the rules to the department, not add all these extra, oversteps and tapes.
Interesting. So I interviewed someone else before who said, when it comes to state standards, the local school board can decide what to teach. So you could pass 1,000 more standards for the state of Colorado, and really it's up to the local governments to decide which standards they want to teach. Is that accurate?
To an extent, yes. I would love to see more local control. Obviously, in rural areas, I learned how to artificially inseminate cattle in my FFA class in high school. Someone in Denver school systems is not going to use that. So, it should be, but they might learn in elementary school how to use a public bus. And that's great for the kids that are there. The issue we see is they hold a lot of, I say they, the governor and, administration hold a lot of funds saying, if you don't match this, because we have requirements now, it really is the state's been trying to encroach and take over local authority. Right now, still, the local authority still has a lot of discretion, but we're seeing that slowly get chipped away.
Yeah, we're right in the middle of CMAS testing, state standardized testing, and we have more state standards than we have time to actually really teach. And there's no accountability for a lot of these state standards other than literacy, math, science, social studies. And teachers now don't even know what is going to be on the assessment. And so I don't know what needs to happen in order for us to start seeing better outcomes for students. But I just know that anytime I see a legislator wanting to introduce more standards to the Colorado Department of Ed, I throw up my hands and go, why? If you're not going to test it, it's not going to be taught. I can tell you that because teachers are already fried and burnt out from what they're held accountable for testing. Like you mentioned this term, like feel-good bills. I think people go to the Capitol and they go, oh, I'm going to throw in this standard and require the state of Colorado to tell everybody they need to teach these standards. Seems like a waste of time. I'd rather see someone do what you're doing, which is like repeal some of these bureaucracies down at the Capitol. So talk to me about where your love for politics came from.
Yeah, it really came growing up. I mean, it's always, if you don't come to the table, you don't get fed, you miss meals, okay, well, if you're not going to listen, you can have it the next meal. And we see that in a lot of, if you're not at the table, people make policies without you. So my thing was really, I couldn't do what I wanted to do. So I want to be an advocate for those who are living those dreams. EMS, I went and got certified in a community college for that. Aspired to, one day be a paramedic. At the same time, I was applying to go to West Point and wanted to serve in the military. I got denied both accounts because of medical issues. Love agriculture, but in a single parent household, who my mom was a special education teacher, so very fixed income. we didn't have the funds to have our own property for animals or, for crops. So I went and helped other farmers and ranchers. We had our small hobby farm of goats, but that wasn't enough to make a living on. So, but farmers and ranchers, were making generational stances. We have centennial farms that have been here 100 years. So the fact that I wasn't able to be, first responder, the medic side, military, wasn't born into agriculture, haven't married into agriculture, but love assisting with it. I wanted to come be at the voice at the table because as well as I do, teachers don't have time, to get through lessons plans and be with their own family, let alone driving up to the Capitol. Our first responders are burnt out. They don't have time to come advocate once they're off shift. Military members are too often overseas or at bases. Again, they don't have time. Farmers and ranchers are all dependent on weather. They could want to come and then we get a huge fire or blizzard. So I wanted to be that consistency voice and then making sure that I can reach out to them so that their values are being heard.
That's really important and very good to know that you're down there thinking about those of us who can't physically get down there because we're in our jobs. I know I have signed up several times to testify from my classroom because it's at 1:30 in the afternoon, but it's also a great way for my students to see me talking about issues that impact them in real time. And it's just been really great to, oh, yay, doggy. Was that your doggy?
I do. It's she was sitting in my lap the whole time. So.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Tell us who this is.
This is Peaches. And so she's a Capitol dog. We have a Capitol caucus for the dogs at the Capitol. She comes, just to make sure, spreading mental health awareness. I alluded to the medical things I had. So when I was going through chemo, she became my support system. One of the things we see, and it sees our, students all the time too, is one of the biggest stigmas is you can't let people know you're not okay. And so I want to bridge that gap saying, no, mental health is as important as physical health. We need to treat it. It's okay not to be okay, but you should ask for help. You need to reach out. You have support systems. Ideally, we want people to be okay, but they shouldn't be scared to admit that they're not.
That's beautiful. And I'm such a dog lover. I used to be a manager at a doggy daycare. So anytime I see dogs, I'm just like, oh my goodness, they're so cute. So next time I come down to the Capitol, I'm going to look for Peaches. So, but
come have a meeting with her. It's her office.
Oh, okay, for sure. I'll bring some treats. Okay. Yes, we'll make it a date at the Capitol. So, Dusty, you are a woman of faith. How do you embed your faith in your work down at the Capitol? How does that impact you?
Yeah, I made the promise, honestly, when I was still applying to go to West Point. So it's been like a lifelong promise since I was a junior in high school, that I would never be afraid to get on my knees to pray, but I'd always stand up for what I believe in. And vastly pointing out, at that time to, my high school peers, so a lot of teenagers, that, it's not weak if you have to take a moment to pray or, read the Bible, or you need time to reflect, and you don't always say what's on your mind in the moment, that you have to, reflect and process where your heart is. But you should never bend over. You should never take a knee to infringements on your rights or what's not right. You see someone at high school time, if you see someone getting bullied, you shouldn't be passive. You should stand up and protect them. As learning about politics, if you see a lot of people trying to erode on parental rights, free market, capitalism, our constitutional rights, we shouldn't be quiet. We shouldn't be complacent, because that's where the government wins. It's up to the people to take back their government and run it as a people's government. And so that's something I promised all my constituency running. I hold at the Capitol, where if it goes against my, my moral beliefs, my principles, that comes first. And I'll never take a vote because of lobby pressure or media pressure. It will always be back to the core foundations of why I ran and what I believe in. And I always will express, my faith. I will pray for people. We've seen it this year a lot, that I will always say, "In God we trust," when they admit that from the pledge. So I'll say it louder, and just making sure that we do carry, the actions we do between Sundays sometimes speak louder than when we show up and preach on Sunday.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I did an episode on, under God and why that's so important for our nation. And it's not really about your freedom of religion, but it's about reminding us of where our inalienable rights come from, which is the Creator. And if we forget that our rights come from God and not the government, then we can easily succumb to socialism, communism, any kind of form of government, Sharia law, anything that we're seeing across the country that will start to erode our rights. And one of the things that we learn in LPR is one of the pillars that we must understand the origin of our rights. We must be able to identify the threats to those rights and then be able to defend against those threats. And that is why I say under God, because I want to remember that our rights come from God and that we're all created equal and all of those wonderful things. So thank you, Dusty, for having the courage to stand up for that and to pray in the walls and the halls of the people's house, because that is what I want you to go down there and fight and protect our freedoms. So was there anything surprising that you learned during your time in LPR? Because I think by that time you were already a representative and already had all of this political experience, but was there anything that you were like, wow, that really strengthens my argument?
The messaging, I really learned that what we know can be our biggest weakness because what we know people don't know. And at first that came from agriculture, right? Like I grew up in it, so I speak it and urban colleagues don't understand. But then we talk about the Constitution, all of our inalienable rights. And we can go down and preach it all the time. But if we don't set that base for everyone else, they have no idea what we're talking about. And I learned that from LPR, that it's not only our job to protect them, but set the groundwork, because we can go, and it's helped me so much in committee and in bills, that you have to set the groundwork of why it's important or what does it mean in a very, not a condescending, but a very just generalized, easy to explain, common sense wording. So it's not too above people's heads. Set the base, they actually understand where you're coming from, and then you can defend it. But if we just come in defending all the time, strong, blazing, but they have no idea why it's a right, what's the importance, the history of it, we're never going to win with the defending of it because they have no idea why we're defending it. And that was huge in LPR, of always being questioned, as you know, with the Schaefer Minute. And they'd say, well, why? Why is that important? You're like, well, obviously it's important, but why? You have to get to the why in the background.
Were you ever a victim of Speak Out with Bob Schaefer? Because he never asked me a question, so I was really glad. But were you asked a question?
I was, and it was really on the, why do we need to be a conservative in government? Why do we need less? And it really got me, because it really showed, it's like, well, obviously, parents know best and farmers know best and small businesses know best. It's like, why? And he was really pushing for the root of how were we founded? Why did we leave and become America? Why does overreach look bad, and what histories have we seen? And he was digging very deep, as he should. But I was like, I'm in a room of peers that understand this. Why do I have to explain? Well, they're going to go talk to people and need talking points. I'm not always going to be in a room of LPR friendlies. If we keep talking to each other, we're not spreading the word, we're not being the sprinkler. So how do we tell people who aren't in that inner circle?
So Dusty, before we go, can you share your website for our listeners and how they can support you in your reelection bid?
Yeah, it's dustyforcolorado.com. Has all my contact information there, newsletter updates, videos, committee work. What am I doing in district? Dusty, DUSTYFOR, Colorado.com.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Representative Johnson. I know you've got a lot of work to do. And to my listeners, thank you for tuning in, and catch me next time. And remember, educating the mind without the heart is no education. So seek wisdom, cultivate virtue, and speak truth.
Thanks for tuning in to Restoring Education in America with Priscilla Rahn. Visit PriscillaRahn.com to connect or learn how you can sponsor future episodes to keep this message of faith, freedom, and education on the air.